What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving into a set of numbers that should make any American sitting in his living room sit up straight and pay attention. Over the past 3 years, and I mean the full 3-year stretch from 2023 through the first half of 2025, roughly 48,000 Indian citizens have packed up their entire lives, said goodbye to their families and moved. Well, let's just say they moved eastward. Now, 48,000, that is not a rounding error. That is not a couple of tech nerds on a temporary work assignment. That is the equivalent of taking an entire mid-sized American city, think something like Santa Fe, New Mexico, or Flint, Michigan, or even Boulder, Colorado, and airlifting every single man, woman, and child, along with all their furniture and their pet dogs, and dropping them straight into somebody else's backyard. Imagine that for a second. If those 48,000 people all concentrated themselves into one single district of a major city over there, you wouldn't just casually notice them. You'd feel them. I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, but let's be brutally honest. You walk down the street to grab your morning coffee, you step into the local grocery store, you ride the public bus, and the air around you is thick with cumin, turmeric, cardamom, and all those rich, heavy spices that define Indian cooking. That's not a complaint, that's just a sensory fact. When you drop a small army of people from one intense food culture into another, the entire atmosphere changes. Period. End of story. Now, let's actually look at the raw visa numbers, because this is where the story goes from interesting to absolutely mind-blowing. In the full calendar year of 2023, that's January through December of that year, the host country that we're talking about, the one that's receiving all these people, issued roughly 200,000 visas to Indian nationals. That's a solid number. Nothing crazy, nothing historic, just a normal flow, but then something shifted, something snapped. Fast forward to the first 5 months of 2025, January, February, March, April, and May. And that number didn't just inch up. It didn't just grow. It more than doubled. We're now looking at somewhere between 450,000 and 480,000 visas issued in just those 5 months alone. That is not growth. That is a full-blown stampede. That is a tidal wave. That is the kind of number that makes immigration officials choke on their coffee. So the obvious question hits you right between the eyes. Why the sudden obsession with the East? I mean, for decades, for generations, the Indian dream was always the same. It was always America. It was always the United States, with Canada as the backup, the United Kingdom as the third choice, and Australia as the fourth. Those were the golden tickets. Those were the white picket fence destinations. Those were the places where you could make real money, send it back home to your village, build a new house for your parents, and become the local hero who made it. So why the pivot? Why is everyone suddenly looking east instead of west? Why is the flow of traffic rerouting itself so dramatically? And I'm not going to sugarcoat this for one single second. It's because we, America, along with our 3 usual allies, slammed the door so hard that we broke the hinges right off the frame. The West collectively pulled the plug on India's traditional gold plating pipeline. We didn't just close the door, we boarded it up, welded it shut, and put up a neon sign that says, "Keep out, let's start with the United States," because that's where the heaviest hammer dropped. When Donald Trump took office again in 2025, and look, I know some of you love him, some of you hate him, but facts are facts, and we're not here to play politics. He went full throttle, no holds barred America first. And India was squarely, undeniably, unapologetically in his crosshairs. One of the proposals that came out of that administration was absolutely bonkers. It was so extreme that even hardcore immigration hawks raised their eyebrows. The proposal was this: hike the H-1B work visa application fee, which was already several $1,000s and not exactly cheap, all the way up to $100,000. $100,000 for a single visa application. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, here's the kicker, and this is where it gets personal. Over 70% of all H-1B visa applicants in any given year are Indian nationals. That's not a coincidence, that's a demographic fact. That's the reality of the global ET labor market. So when you jack up the price of that visa to 100 grand, you're not just adjusting for inflation or covering administrative costs, you are literally pricing out an entire nation. For an average software engineer sitting in Hyderabad or Bangalore or Chennai, that $100,000 fee is more than their annual salary, times 10. It's not a visa fee anymore. It's a hostile takeover of their American dream. It's a financial gut punch. It's the kind of number that makes you give up before you even start. But Trump didn't stop there. Oh no, he was just getting warmed up. He also slapped a 25% punitive tariff. That's a quarter of the total value on any American company that outsourced significant work overseas. Now, who does that hit hardest? Who is the absolute bullseye for that policy? India's entire outsourcing industry, the crown jewel of their economy, the engine that has powered their middle class for 2 decades. Companies like Infosys, Tata Consultancy Services, Wipro, HCL, these giants live and die by sending relatively cheap Indian labor to do work that American companies used to do in-house. That 25% tariff wasn't a warning shot. It was a direct mortar round to their entire business model. It was a declaration of economic war, and here's the part that really gets me, and I think it says a lot about where we are as a country right now. The American people got in on the action too. This wasn't just government policy, this was grassroots hostility in September 2025, so just a few months into the new administration. Regular American netizens, everyday folks sitting at home on their computers, launched something called the Lock the Ticket campaign. What did they do? They organized themselves on social media, coordinated their efforts, and flooded online airline booking sites with fake reservations. They held seats on flights without actually buying the tickets. They gamed the system, their goal to prevent Indian tech workers who were already in the US from being able to buy tickets to fly back home for a visit and then return. They literally weaponized the booking system to strand people overseas. That's not policy, that's not legislation. That's a vigilante middle finger from Main Street USA, and it worked. It actually worked. Now let's move north to Canada. Oh, Canada, the polite, welcoming maple syrup, soaked safety net that everyone loves to romanticize for years. They had an open door policy for Indian students. You want a study permit? Here you go, buddy. Come on in. Bring your books, bring your tuition money. We love diversity. But then they started noticing a pattern, a very ugly pattern. Thousands upon thousands of students would land at Pearson International Airport in Toronto, take a cheerful selfie with their acceptance letter, and then vanish. Poof, gone. They weren't attending classes, they weren't hitting the books, they weren't sitting in lecture halls, they were disappearing into the black market labor force, driving Ubers, washing dishes in restaurant kitchens, working construction sites under the table, cleaning hotel rooms for cash. The Canadian government finally did a proper head count, crunched the numbers, and realized the truth. Tens of thousands, not hundreds, not dozens, but tens of thousands of Indian nationals were openly and systematically abusing the student visa system. Their student visa was basically a backdoor work permit. It was a cheap way to get into the country and then vanish into the gray economy. So Ottawa finally snapped. They had had enough. They cranked up the rejection rate for Indian study permits to a staggering 74%. Let me repeat that, 74%. That means if you're an Indian applicant today, 7.5 out of every 10 of you are getting a giant red stamp on your file that says the door that used to swing wide open is now a prison cell slot with a guard on the other side. Then we've got the United Kingdom in October 2025. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and yes, he's a Labour guy, not a conservative, so you can't blame this on right-wing nationalism, stood up at a podium and flat out said, on the record, that the UK would not be providing any more visa slots to Indian tech workers. Not fewer. Not a review, not a consultation, zero, zilch, nada, and the numbers back up his words. Within 1 single year of that announcement, UK health and care worker visas issued to Indians crashed by 67%. Nursing visas, which were a huge pipeline for Indian professionals, down 79%. That's not a slowdown. That's a free fall off a cliff. The British essentially looked India in the eye and said, we love your curry, we love your cricket, but keep your workers at home. And finally, let's talk about Australia. This one is almost funny if it weren't so tragic. In the 2024-2025 fiscal year, Australia took in about 76,000 Indian migrants. That's nearly 3 times the number that went to the eastern host country we've been talking about. 3 times that's an enormous flow of people. And Aussies started looking around their cities, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and thought to themselves, mate, if we keep this up, Sydney is not going to be Sydney anymore. It's going to be New Delhi South. It's going to be Mumbai on the Pacific. So they hit the brakes, and they hit them hard. They raised visa fees across the board. They sharply cut permanent residency caps. They tightened the eligibility criteria, and they made it absolutely crystal clear. The party is over. The bar is closed. Go home. So here's the reality that nobody in the mainstream media wants to talk about. India didn't suddenly fall in love with the East. This isn't about cultural affinity, shared values, or any of that warm. Fuzzy stuff. America, Canada, Britain, and Australia collectively ripped out the IV drip. The West turned off the tap, and India was left standing there holding an empty bucket, looking around for another source of water. Now, you might say, fine, the West is closed, but why not just stay home? Why not ride it out in India? Why not make the best of it in your own country? Because, my friends, home is a nightmare. Let's not mince words here. India is not a rising superpower. It's a pressure cooker with a faulty valve. We always hear about India's demographic dividend, the talking points, young population, huge workforce. Median age, under 30, future superpower, blah, 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 blah. That's the sales pitch. That's what they tell investors. That's what they tell the World Bank. But the truth on the ground is that this so-called dividend hasn't paid out a single penny. In fact, it's become a liability. India's manufacturing sector never took off the way China's did. They don't have the factories, the assembly lines, the industrial parks, or the infrastructure to absorb all those millions of young bodies that are entering the job market every single month. And the numbers are absolutely brutal. I'm not making this up. This comes from India's own Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. This is not a foreign source. This is their own data. In 2024, the unemployment rate for Indians aged 15 to 24, so your college-aged kids, your recent graduates, your young adults, hit 45%. That means almost 1 out of every 2 young people in that age bracket cannot find a job. Let that sink in, but it gets worse. And this is the part that really stings. If you have a bachelor's degree or higher, if you did everything right, you went to college, you got the diploma, you followed the formula. Your unemployment rate is 3 times higher than someone who dropped out of high school. You spent years in university, took out loans, studied your ass off, and you're less employable than a kid who quit in 10th grade. How messed up is that? How demoralizing must that be? Let me give you a concrete, mind-boggling example to show you just how insane the competition is over there. In 2019, and this is pre-COVID, so no pandemic excuses, Indian Railways, the state-run transportation behemoth that employs millions, announced about 63,000 entry-level positions. We're talking manual labor here, sweeping platforms, carrying luggage, cleaning trains, basic grunt work that requires no special skills. How many applications did they receive for those 63,000 slots? 19 million, 19 million? Do the math with me. That's over 300 applicants for every single job opening, 300 people. Fighting tooth and nail for one low-level position. You feel that pressure, your skull starts to crack, you can't breathe. That's the reality of the Indian job market. And what about money? What about the purchasing power that's supposed to come with a billion-plus population? Forget the hype, forget the glossy brochures. According to the 2026 World Inequality Report, and this is a respected, peer-reviewed source, the richest 10% of Indians grab nearly 58% of the entire national income. The bottom half of the population, that's about 700 million people, they split just 15%, 15. That's not a middle class. That's a feudal system with a smartphone. Now, how many Indians actually have real purchasing power? How many can afford something as basic as a $100 smartphone, which is the bare minimum for participating in the digital economy? The realistic, grounded estimate is somewhere between 130 million and 140 million people. That's it. The other 1 billion, yes. 1 billion with a B might as well be invisible to retailers. They don't show up on any balance sheet. They're not customers. They're statistics. They're ghosts in the economic machine. So if you're a young Indian with a degree, no job, no money, and no future, what do? You leave. You go where the paycheck is thicker, you go where your skills are valued, and that's where the Eastern host country becomes attractive. Take India's crown jewel, the IT sector, the one thing they're actually known for globally. An average software engineer in India makes about 600,000 rupees per year. That translates to roughly 8,300 US dollars annually per month. That's about 690 bucks. Now, if that same engineer buys a plane ticket, flies to Shenzhen or Hangzhou, and gets a comparable development job, his monthly salary for the same level of work doubles. Easily, it might even triple if he's good. That's real money. That's rent, food, savings, and a fat remittance wire back to mom and dad in the village. When you see that kind of financial uplift, the decision becomes obvious. But it's not just about money. It's about survival, because let's talk about the physical environment in India. It is straight up hostile in 2026, and we're talking about the recent past here. The capital city of New Delhi recorded 45 degrees Celsius for multiple consecutive days. Let me translate that for my American audience. That's 113 degrees Fahrenheit. You step outside in that heat, and within minutes you're drenched in sweat. You stand still for too long and you risk heat stroke. Now imagine that heat, and no electricity. India's power grid is so fragile, so poorly maintained, so underfunded that when temperatures spike in the summer, the entire system collapses. Brownouts, blackouts, rolling shutdowns, you name it. No fans, no air conditioning. You just sit there in the dark, in your own sweat, melting like a candle, and water, don't even get me started. Studies show that about 70% of India's groundwater is contaminated with industrial waste, agricultural runoff, and raw sewage. You can't drink from the tap in most places without getting violently sick. Approximately 37 million Indians contract waterborne diseases every single year. That's more than the entire population of Canada. You have entire villages along rivers that are now known locally as cancer villages. Because the water is so poisoned that tumors and chronic illnesses have become the new normal. Kids are born sick. Adults die young. That's the reality. And then there's the iconic Delhi garbage mountain. And I'm not using mountain metaphorically. I mean it literally. It's a 17 million ton heap of rotting, festering waste that covers an area equivalent to 40 football fields. 40 in the summer when the temperature hits 113 degrees Fahrenheit. That mountain of trash gets so hot that it spontaneously combusts. It catches fire on its own, releases toxic, cancerous smoke, and blankets the surrounding neighborhoods in a cloud of poison. Hundreds of thousands of residents choke on that air. They get respiratory infections, eye problems, skin diseases. That's not a developing country problem anymore. That's a humanitarian catastrophe, so put it all together. The West shuts the door in your face. India offers no jobs, no pay, no clean water, no reliable power, and literal flaming garbage mountains. What would you do? You'd buy a plane ticket. You'd go east. You'd go anywhere that has a functioning society. Now, here's where the policy shift comes in, and this is the game changer on the 1st of October, 2025. Mark that date. The Eastern host country officially introduced a brand new visa category, the K visa. This visa was specifically designed for young foreign tech talent. Before this, if you wanted to work in that country, you had to be a big shot, a senior executive, a Nobel-level researcher, a world-class professor to qualify for the older R visa. That was the elite track. But the K visa lowered the bar significantly. Now, if you graduated from a recognized university, either domestic or international, with a STEM-related degree, you're eligible. That's it. No 10 years of experience required. No celebrity status needed. Just a degree from a decent school and a pulse. And the results were instantaneous. The number of direct flights between India and the host country jumped from 30 per week to 150 per week, a 5-fold increase. The visa issuance numbers went through the roof, doubling what they were in 2023. The Indian media went absolutely berserk. Headlines screamed about the new opportunity. Social media lit up with excitement. The data took off like a rocket, and there was no stopping it. So where did all these K visa holders actually land? Where did they cluster? The answer is Shenzhen. That city now has a permanent Indian resident population of over 120,000. Let me repeat that. 120,000 Indians right now living in Shenzhen. That's not a small community. That's a colony. If you walk through Huaqiangbei, that legendary electronics district, the mecca of gadgets and components, you'll see about 7,000 foreigners on an average day, and a huge chunk of them, I'd say a majority, are Indian. They're bargaining with local vendors in heavily accented English, throwing around tech jargon, haggling over prices, and acting like they've been there for a decade. They're not tourists, they're residents. Why Shenzhen? Because that city is the hardware and tech capital of the planet. It's where the components are manufactured, where the prototypes are built, where the supply chains converge from all over China. And that plays directly into India's traditional strength, engineering, and it's a natural match. It's like peanut butter and jelly. But here's the deeper angle, the part that most analysts miss, the part that doesn't make it into the headlines, the factories in the Pearl River Delta. That massive manufacturing engine that supplies half the world are all scrambling to do one thing: export. They have the most complete, most integrated industrial supply chain on earth, but they need salespeople, people who can navigate South Asian markets, speak the local languages, understand the cultural nuances, and close deals in places like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and yes, India itself. And who fits that description perfectly? An Indian expat. He speaks English fluently. It's his first or second language. He knows the subcontinent inside and out. He can talk to local distributors without missing a beat. So these Indian workers aren't just coders anymore. They're becoming the frontline sales force for a global manufacturing giant. They use their language skills and cultural fluency to push products back into their home region, and they get paid well for it. Let me be crystal clear about something. Because I know my audience and I know the comment section is going to be wild, the host country has strict immigration laws. Every single foreigner must enter legally, follow all the rules, and respect public order. They are not interested in low-quality immigrants sneaking in through the cracks. They don't want criminals, they don't want fraudsters, they don't want people who treat their system like a piata. They want talent and they want compliance, but that doesn't stop the underground industry from thriving. India has a long, proud, documented tradition of international labor brokering. They've been doing this for decades, sending workers to the Gulf, to Southeast Asia, to Europe, to North America. They've got it down to a science: visa applications, housing arrangements, resume padding, interview coaching. It's a one-stop shop in Andhra Pradesh. They've even created what I can only describe as engineering schools that exist for one purpose: to churn out workers who can pass interviews and get exported. Villages pool their entire savings to send one guy abroad. And then they wait for the remittance checks to roll in. It's a system that's been perfected over generations. Now that the West is closed, these brokers have turned their full attention to the East. They're studying the new K visa rules like it's the SAT. They're looking for angles, loopholes, shortcuts, and they're finding them. For example, someone registers a shell company, a tech consultancy with no office, no employees, no actual business. They fake a stack of employment contracts, bring over an entire extended family on long-term visas. And once everyone's settled, they dissolve the company and vanish into thin air, clean getaway. The restaurant visa: open an Indian restaurant, apply for work permits for chefs and managers, bring them in, then fire them after a few months and replace them with the next batch. The restaurant becomes a revolving door for labor trafficking. And that's not even the worst of it. Forgery, it's rampant. Fake IELTS scores, just pay a proxy to take the test for you. Fake degrees, buy a diploma from a diploma mill in Delhi. Need to erase a prior deportation record in some small towns. You can pay a few $100 and get a fake death certificate and then come back as a new person with a clean slate. It's the Wild West out there. It's like the old frontier, but with biometrics. And what's the predictable result? A surge in illegal overstays and black market labor. In the first 4 months of 2025 alone, that's January through April, the number of Indian nationals overstaying their visas in the host country jumped by nearly 50%. Some come in on tourist visas, which are supposed to be for sightseeing and short visits, and then start delivering food, cleaning apartments. Working construction under the table or selling street food, they're invisible, they're illegal, and they're a massive headache for immigration authorities who are already stretched thin. And don't think for 1 second that the Indian government is innocent in all of this. They're actively drafting an Overseas Mobility Act, a law designed explicitly to encourage Indian citizens to go abroad and send money back home. The logic is brutally simple: export the unemployed, import the remittances, turn the entire world into a pressure release valve for India's population bomb. They're not just letting this happen, they are facilitating it, promoting it, and building a legal framework around it. It's official policy now. Now, when you dump that many people from one intense, densely packed culture into another, there's going to be friction. That's inevitable. That's human nature. Let's talk about the cultural clash, because it's real, it's uncomfortable, and nobody in the mainstream media wants to touch it. In traditional Indian culture, the left hand is reserved for hygiene purposes, if you catch my drift, and the right hand is for eating, greeting. And handling objects, that's fine inside India, that's their custom. But when you have someone using that left hand to press elevator buttons, turn faucet handles, grab handrails on the subway, and open doors, well, you can imagine the reaction. People in the host country start wondering, is that E. coli count acceptable? And the honest answer is, no, it's not. That's not racism, that's basic public health. Then there's the lack of spatial awareness, what some sociologists call boundary blindness. You see Indians eating with their hands on the subway, spreading food and grease on public seats. You see them sleeping on hotel lobby sofas, sprawling across airport floors, and sitting barefoot on the Bund in Shanghai, a prime tourist spot where people go to take wedding photos to them. That's completely normal. That's how they live back home. To the locals, it's a violation of public decorum, it's disrespectful, it's jarring. And let's not forget the caste stuff. Some Indians try to bring their caste hierarchy with them, treating lower caste colleagues like servants. expecting special treatment based on birth, refusing to share workspaces with certain people. That nonsense does not fly. The host country doesn't care about your Brahmin credentials, your Kshatriya lineage, or any of that ancient baggage. You're all foreigners. You're all judged by what you can do, not who your great-grandfather was. If you try to pull that caste crap in an office in Shenzhen, you'll be out the door before lunch. So here's the bottom line, those 48,000 visas, and the hundreds of thousands more that are already on the way, aren't about love, romance, or cultural affinity. They're about desperation and opportunity, pure and simple. The West, led by America, pulled the plug, Canada, the UK. And Australia followed suit with their own restrictions. India turned into a pressure cooker of unemployment, pollution, crumbling infrastructure, and toxic air. And the East opened a window, just a crack, with the K visa. That's it. That's the whole story. But let's be absolutely 100% clear, the host country is not a charity. They're not running a shelter. They're not a dumping ground for the world's problems. They're handing out work permits to people who can actually contribute, not to people who want to game the system, break the laws, or treat public spaces like their personal living room. If you want to code in Shenzhen, fine. Here's a keyboard, here's a desk. Now deliver value. If you want to sell products across South Asia, great, here's a product catalog, here's a territory, go close deals. If you want to build a career in the world's most dynamic manufacturing hub, fantastic. Show us what you've got. But if you come in with fake documents, a fake degree, a fake name, and a fake smile, the border police and the biometric data systems will flag you within hours. And if you think you can ignore basic public hygiene or bring your caste baggage with you, you'll find out real quick that the host country has exactly zero tolerance for that nonsense. The door is open, but it's not a barn door. There's a threshold, there's a filter, there's a vetting process. And it's getting tighter every single day, not looser. So for those of you watching, especially my American audience, don't think this is someone else's problem. Don't think this is some distant issue that has nothing to do with you. This is a direct, undeniable consequence of our own policies. We shut the door and the traffic rerouted. That's how global migration works. It's not a river, it's a pressure system. You block it in one place, and it bursts out somewhere else with even more force. And right now, that pressure is building in the East. Keep your eyes open because this is just the beginning. This is the first chapter of a much longer story. The numbers we're seeing today, 48,000 in 3 years, 480,000 in 5 months, those are going to look like small potatoes a decade from now. The flow will only accelerate. That's it for today. I've said my piece. I've given you the facts, the numbers, the context, and the cold, hard truth. No sugarcoating, no apologizing, just reality. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp, stay honest, and don't let anyone tell you that facts are offensive, because facts don't care about your feelings. Peace out.